Hey everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and we are in the middle of Esther chapter 6 as we are working our way through this book of the Bible one little bit at a time. If it's your first time here, that's what we do. We try to have some fun with it, try to think real hard about it. There's no real rush, so we can take our time, and I'm super glad you're here if this is your first time. Thanks for checking it out. If you've been here for a while, maybe right now you're thinking to yourself, are we still on the parade thing? It's cool and all, and you're right, it's a really fun moment in Esther, but that's a lot of parade coverage. And if that's where your head is at, to you I would say, we're in a fight, a huge blood feud between you and I starting right now, because there is so much more. It's just the parade. There's a big deal. The parade has a lot of things that we need to talk about. I'm kidding. We're not in a fight. We're not actually in a fight. I understand how you could get there, because it does seem like we've been lingering on this one simple little thing. But I really think this is the high point of the whole story. It feels like from here on out, we're on the downhill to things getting solved. This is the pivot moment. This is the grandest reversal, the most shocking reversal of all of the reversals in a book that is filled with reversals and is about reversals. So let's read the text and talk about where we're at in the story for just a second, and then I want to try to sell you on why there's more to be gleaned from this parade thing here in just a minute. All right. So Haman, he's the bad guy, wants to kill all the Jews. He's the right-hand man of King Xerxes. He feels like this is going to be the best day he's ever had. He goes to Xerxes. Xerxes broaches a topic, and Haman sees his opportunity to pounce and get what he's always wanted, which is to be robed in the royal garb of the king and to be led around and effectively presented as having the rightness and goodness of the king upon him, bestowed upon him by the king. That's what he wants. So he asks for it, but he doesn't realize that what he was asking for was actually going to be given to someone else. And what's worse, if you're Haman, the bad guy, is it's going to be given to your blood enemy, Mordecai the Jew, the person who you wanted to see killed. And so Haman has to go get a royal horse and a royal robe, and he has to lead Mordecai the Jew around in a triumph, in a parade, through the streets of Susa, repeatedly saying nice things about him. This is how it goes, Esther 6:11. So Haman, the bad guy, the enemy of the Jews, got the robe and the horse, that's the king's robe and the king's horse, and he robed Mordecai, the Jew, his blood enemy, who he is working actively to have killed. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, now bear in mind, this is one of the king's officials presenting someone else with the authority of the king. Haman proclaimed before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." What an amazing day for Mordecai. What a horrible day for Haman. And what an interesting set of ideas this brings up for you and me as we think about Esther in the larger context of the whole Bible. One of the big questions about this book, and really not even recently, one of the big questions historically has been, why is it in there? God doesn't get overtly mentioned, and it happens in a faraway setting. It feels a little different narratively and setting-wise from the rest of the stuff in the Old Testament. What's the deal with Esther? Well, I would argue that one of the places we get an answer to that is right here in this parade business. And part of the answer to that question we talked about yesterday when we were discussing that theological motif that runs through the whole Bible about how all of the nations will be drawn to the temple and how God's chosen people will be a blessing to all of the nations, and how the end goal, the end vision for history presented in the Bible is not annihilation of everyone who didn't get it, but it involves a whole lot of people and a whole lot of nations who didn't get it coming around, kind of like Nineveh did under the teaching of Jonah. And then when they come around, they acknowledge the one true God, and they show up physically to acknowledge and worship the one true God, and they do so in procession. So anytime you see processions in the Bible, I feel like at the very least, that is an echo of the big picture trajectory, how things are going to work out in the Bible. At the very most, sometimes it's an overt allusion to, not illusion, but allusion to that big picture theological theme. Which is it here in the book of Esther? It's debatable. But either way, it reminds us of that big picture theological theme. But now we get to another thing that I think is another through line theme of the whole Bible theologically, but that I think is even more overt. And that's why we got to linger on the whole parade thing. And that's why I think this is a centerpiece for the awesomeness of the book of Esther, and a reason that the book of Esther is in the Bible and is intended to be in the Bible, is designed and ordained to be in the Bible by the God who I believe is behind this document. I know there are a bunch of you here who do not see it the same way in terms of there being a God or God being behind it. I continue to think you're awesome for being here, and I continue to want to turn over my cards in terms of what I think so you can take that into account. There, cards turned over. What is this theme that I keep referencing? Well, Haman takes the clothing of the king, which represents the authority of the king, the justice of the king, the goodness of the king, all of the good positive attributes that are held out as being associated with the king. Haman takes that and he puts it on the back of somebody who's been sitting at the gate in sackcloth and ashes outside of the inner courts of the king. And he leads him around like he's a son of the king, like somehow the qualities of the king have been imparted to him. He is robed in, clothed in stuff that is reflective of the values and the value of the king. This is so prominent throughout the rest of the Bible when it comes to the relationship between God and redeemed people. The Bible teaches super clearly that people have sin on them. Sin isn't just naughty, bad things that people do. That is part of it. That's definitely in the Bible. It's also a fallen state, a state of entropy and brokenness, a state of perpetual decay toward the grave. Sin is something you do on purpose. Sin is something you do on accident with the best of intentions. Sin is something that happens to you. It's an all-encompassing term for everything that is broken about people and about the world and that is in need of redemption. God's redemptive plan is meant to resolve this crisis. The problem of humanity and creation is sin. Well, how does that work? Well, somehow God imparts to humanity his righteousness. He robes humanity. He robes that which is broken in his goodness and in his rightness. And that's not language that I'm making up. That's language that's all over the Bible. Am I stalling? Yeah, maybe a tiny bit. Is it because my Bible drill didn't go well and I had trouble finding Isaiah? Yeah, maybe a tiny bit. But I'm there now, suckers, and this is what it sounds like. Isaiah 118. Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. Okay, in and of itself, does that totally spell it out? No, but coupled with this thing that gets said at the very end of the book of Isaiah, you get the impression that this cleaning, this cleansing, involves being robed in the righteousness of God. So the hint happens at the beginning of Isaiah, the payoff in Isaiah 61:10. I delight greatly in the Lord, my soul rejoices in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation and arrayed me in a robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom adorns his head like a priest, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. For as the soil makes the sprout come up and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteous and praise spring up before all nations. There's more to come, but even after 2 bonus verses here, you are seeing, right, this biblical imagery, this theological imagery of God placing his robe of righteousness on people who don't deserve it. Yesterday, I talked about the book of Zechariah and how much I've been reading it and how much I've been enjoying it. Check out this gem from Zechariah, a minor prophet in the Old Testament, chapter 3, verse 3. Now Joshua was dressed in filthy clothes. This is a vision that he's having. As he stood before the angel said to those who were standing before him, "Take off his filthy clothes." Then he said to Joshua, "See, I have taken away your sin, and I will put rich garments on you." Then I said, "Put a clean turban on his head." So they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him while the angel of the Lord stood by. That same imagery is used again in Job, which is the book right next door to the book we're looking at, the book of Esther, Job 29:14. This is Job talking. He says, "I put on righteousness as my clothing. Justice was my robe and my turban." And then the same kind of imagery applies when we get over into the New Testament. In Luke 16, there's a story about another man who sits out at the gates outside of everything. His name is Lazarus, and In this story, there's a rich man who has no interest in Lazarus sitting outside of his gate. And the rich man is clothed in fine earthly attire. But then when they both die, Lazarus is metaphorically clothed in the righteousness of God and is at Abraham's side. And the story plays out from there. Okay, I'm looking at what we still need to talk about and where we're at here. I really wanted to do this all in one conversation, but it's such a big topic and it's so fun and I am getting excited about it. We're just going to do the thing where we split it in half and we pick up immediately where we left off tomorrow. So let's hit pause and we're going to talk more about this biblical theme of being clothed in the righteousness of God and how it might relate to Haman and Mordecai and him getting to wear the king's robe and all of that business here in the book of Esther. Cool. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.